Hello, everybody. Welcome to my studio. It's been a little while. Good to see you, Janny, Miss Susan, and some of you others I can see are here. Maybe not signed in, so you can't comment. But good to be back and see everybody. I thought had a little time tonight, so we could do a little sketching and talk about what's coming up for 2022. So sounds good. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to sketch a red-shouldered hawk tonight. And I think when we give everybody a few minutes to get in, we may just start playing around a little bit and give everybody about 5 minutes. And then we'll talk about that a little bit. And then as we sketch, we'll talk about what's coming up in the new year. And Janny, I'd love to hear how you're doing. Hope you are up and at 'em. And I hope your husband's busy with some new endeavors. So let's see what we got here. We're going to look down at the palette, and I'm going to be sketching probably in mostly pen tonight, but I have a lot of things on standby here that we can look at. So like I said, as we start, we're just going to have a little fun while we give everybody a few minutes to get here. Let's see, and this is the little guy will be, I don't know if you call him a little guy. I guess that depends if he's after you or not. He's after you or not. So it's a good idea always to start with movement, right? And what kind of movement do we have here? Well, this guy's pretty focused, and everything about him is in that focus. So if we thought about the end of this beak, come down to his first leg, come back to his second leg, and then what if we went up and around his back? He's got some gesture, something like that, doesn't he? Right, and what is this doing? Well, it's taking all of this energy and forcing it all up to here, and almost like water, it's getting channeled in here, and it's going to get more and more and more intense, which is good because guess where our finishing is going to be? Our finish is going to be his eye. To be more specific, it's going to be the dark shadow. The dark shadow that is casting on his eye and his beak right there. All right. Can you feel this foot jetting this way? Right, so you got that energy going up. Right, and as it goes up, his chest is bent, isn't it? Which means his tail end is back here, and then his chest is in front of that, and then the head is on top of that. So we got all these big volumes, right? And we're starting to understand what he's doing. And what is he doing? Well, he's stretching this way, and he's being bent here and bent here, and then there'll be another bend right there. Can you feel that happening? Can you feel all that happen? And so one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight is all the different ways that we can look at this, right? Because I know when I started, they'd talk about gesture and get all this, and it seemed really cool, but then how did you go from here into a finished painting or a finished drawing? Okay. So one of the things that I'm going to talk a lot about this year is being clear on your intent. Because that's the only thing that's going to bring any clarity to your art. So if I'm given a reference image like this, usually I'm just going to take one time and explore. And this was kind of my first time through. I don't know how long I spent on that. A half hour, 45 minutes, maybe more, maybe less. But exploring for vision means so that I can see what's important in the reference and how the dark of the eye, the beak, the dark of the end of the shat, how do those line up? His jetting leg and his beak, where do those line up? Where does, you see, I got that a little stiff, didn't I? You guys see that from the eye to the leg right there? Is this going to be more dynamic if we move that leg out like that? Look how much more energy that gives. Okay, so those are the things that I find my first time through. Okay? Just to get familiar with it. Then I'll start breaking it down into gesture or movement. Right? Like, what's the action? What's the abstract action that's happening here? And here we can see, you know, from his leg out through there, right? From this back leg that's bracing up and out. And then we've got this big C happening here. So we can get some clarity on the movement. We could also get clarity on a value map. So if there's anybody out there who doesn't know what the value map is, all that is, a value is how dark or light the mark is. So in this case, we basically have three values: dark, gray, and light. And what a value map is you want to solve your reference in terms of dark, gray, and light. And so each of these things give us different information. Like, this tells us what we need to feel that's going on. And then this tells us the actual pieces we have to make this happen. I hope that makes sense. And then when we go to draw or explore more, what we want to do as artists, we decide how much of this versus how much of that we want. And each of us will come up with a little bit of a different answer. And so that's what makes it art. All right, why don't we jump over to the Procreate for a second and have a closer look at this guy. So one of the things that I'm going to do this year is a project called Collaborations. And I've been looking for a way to teach, and this is the latest idea I have. So I'm going to be working with 3 artists, and over a 4-month period, we're going to produce a painting. I'll be doing the lay-in, and then they'll paint on it. Basically, for every one time I touch the painting, they'll work on it 3 times, and then I'll finish the painting. I'm hoping to video all of this so you can see the ups and the downs and the struggles, and there'll be lots of learning opportunities there. So this is one of those collaborations that we're going to work on. So let's take a look at what I was just talking about in that abstract gesture. So everything seems to kind of come to a focus right there, right at his beak. Right? And you see the dark under the eye. There's a shape right there. That's going to be our end or our focus. Now he's going to be steering this way too. He's focused that way. So we've got this seemingly going the opposite direction, but look what happens when it hits this. It's redirected. So even though the gesture and the feelings like this, some of its components right are going to have a different feel. We're going to get a bend right in here because there's also volume here, volume here. This we can see as just a big volume. That we can see as a volume. And so this volume is below and behind this volume. This volume is behind this one and that one. And this is on top of all of them. Okay, do you guys understand what I mean when I say volume? I want to talk about that because that's another way to solve this problem. Because the value map was showing us what? It's showing us the shadow shapes. And it happens to be that manipulating these shapes are what's going to give us more or less movement. You see the light shape there, and this is a little different because this is shadow and this is dark feathers, but we're going to use that dark and dark to channel our light. Okay, does that make sense? So what we're doing is we're getting away from even the thought of bird, of what this is as a physical object. And we're thinking in terms of what can we do on a two-dimensional surface to give the illusion of 3 dimensions, but not just dead 3 dimension that's alive and moving for us. Okay? So let's explore some of that with some of our sketches. And these are the things I do. There's so many changes this year. Another thing I'm doing is I'm not going to work on paintings anymore that don't have a clear concept. And the reason being is that without a clear concept, there's no way to judge the work. And what's the concept? Well, the concept's the artist idea of the finished piece. Now, when we start, oh, well, things look a certain way, and I just want to be able to draw how things look. But after some investigation, we see that that's not true. There's a lot that depends on how something looks, the light, the day, what's around it. But as an artist, to get anything worthwhile, we have to have an idea we're trying to convey. So when I'm exploring for vision, I'm not only looking for the physical lineup of things happening, but what's the feeling of what's happening? Is this a happy little sparrow looking for seeds, whistling his song? Or is this the collector coming to collect his due? Because each of those have a much different feeling about them, right? And if this is a red-shouldered hawk, we don't want to paint it like a songbird, right? But we want to represent it for what it is. And it just so happens that more important than getting every little contour right, these abstract movements and gestures have a lot more to do with whether it feels like a predator or a songbird. Okay? So one of the reasons that we selected this was because the movement of the pose reinforced everything about this bird. Okay. So doesn't this feel pretty focused and aggressive? That's a focused movement. Well, what do you mean a focused movement? What would be an unfocused movement? Well, what if we... So instead of going towards something, what we're doing is dissipating and going energetically something else. So this might represent a firecracker going off, right? But these kind of movements is not going to represent a predator. Okay, so it was this that brought me to the final decision that this is the thing to sketch. All right, so why don't we sketch for a little while and check in with you guys and see what's happening. Miss Janie, have you been able to draw or anything at all? Let's see. So we're going to start over. And let's give you guys a reference if you want to join in. Let's see here. There we go. You can keep an eye on me too. So just to take that one step further, that value mapping, right? This would be another example of the value mapping. So we're going a little bit of gray over here goes into dark. And this dark is what? It's holding this light dark activity that's happening in here. So you're going to focus to where there's the most detail. What's most detail? Most detail is rather than going gray, dark, light over that distance, we're going light, dark, gray, light, dark, gray, light, dark. So it's just more value changes. So we've got a big steady value change holding a bunch of little bitty value changes. So that is the more of the concept of the painting. When I'm talking concept, I'm talking about things you can control. And if you know how to manipulate value to affect the mood, well, then we can talk about what mood it is. But until you have enough control over value, we've got to step it back and talk about form and things like that. Okay, so for one of my other collaborations, I'm going to be doing a version of this. So we've got this collaboration going on. We've got the Red Hot collaboration going on. And then the final collaboration is going to be some peonies. Right? Now, can you forget that those things are flowers? Can you squint your eyes down? And can you just see the light shape move from left to right? Smaller and tighter in a little ball on the left-hand side, about a third of the way through. And then that kind of spills over to a little bit more open, a little bit in the background, not as so focused, and it goes back. And then as these things open up, we come forward again as we finish with the most open peony on the right-hand side. But rather than seeing that as flowers, can you squint down and see that as one movement of a value? If you can, now you're seeing that as an abstract thing that you can control with your tools. Right? Because you can't do flower with pen or charcoal or pencil. You can't do a person, you can't do a nose, but you can do dark, you can do light, you can do gray. So we want to learn to arrange the dark, light, and gray patterns so that when the average person looks at them, they see a peony, they see a person. But as artists, we know that you can never paint or draw a person. All you can paint or draw is a value, a line. Right? So the sooner you can get into that artist brain and let go of, oh, I want this to be this person, or I want to that, because the better you are at the abstract, the more it'll look like that person, the more it'll represent a peony. And not only will it, quote unquote, look more like it, but it will feel more like it. It'll have an alive feeling to it. Okay, so as always, we're getting down to brass tacks and just talking about and working with things we can control, that we can control and improve. All right, how about back to our red-shouldered hawk? I'm sure that's what Susan's here for. I'm sure that is what Susan's here for. Okay, so as I'm playing around, another thing I love to do is to have something that makes a little lighter marks, so I can have a free go at it. So if I imagine I want to come up here, for instance, let's just say that we take our canvas and we divide it into thirds. You know, a rough compositional tool you can use is to put points of interest on your third. Well, what's our finish and point of interest? Well, we talked about the shadow of that eye, didn't we? So I can just go ahead and finish this right here by going, this is where our finish goes. And why would I go there? Well, because it happens on a third, and I know that's a good place for things to happen. And then his beak will come right out here. And then what I want to do is get the movement. Right? Does his foot come as, not quite as far out. It's going to come about like that. And then we know he's got a wide stance over here, and we want a good. So can we come that far? Right, see, I'm not thinking bird or even form or anything like that. By letting go of those things, I can very quickly get absolute control over where this is on my canvas and then build it out from there. So the idea is we start with our movement first. We place our movement on the canvas or paper where we like it, and then we build the forms on top of that. Okay, so let's see if we can do that then. So let's loosely, we know we've got that beak heading through there. That's going, and then what kind of form does this head have? Right, it's round, tight here, bigger here, finishes off there. Boom, and that's going to fall into a bigger volume. Right, and there's going to be the underplane, and this right here, we can see that. This is going to be our corner. If we envisioned this as a box, we could see that being the corner right there. So in real life, instead of drawing an entire side and everything, we can mark the corner right there. And then we know this is shadow, and then that'll turn more into light. Okay, and this is the bend. And then so we're going to bend back out this way. And this is coming from behind and all kind of blending in together here. Where do we want that final leg? Oh, look, so where did we end it up here? That's a third, and that's a third. So we've got the main movement going from third to third. Okay, and we can find that out very quickly without having to do a lot of work, because then if we've got to move it around or shove it around, well, we've just got a few lines down, big deal. We don't have days and days of shading or painting or anything like that. We want to make these decisions before we get the paint out, before we start to work. Okay, because maybe these are bad decisions and we want to see that and get those changed before that. Okay, so once I have that, I can think about the value mapping. Now there's one other great big change I'm going to make here. If you look underneath, right underneath the bird there, look at the cast shadow on the ground. Is that a good, it's not a good shape and it's not descriptive, right? For one reason, the ground is supposed to be laying down and laying horizontal, right? While the bird is more vertical or an upright, breaking that horizontal plane going back into space. So to represent that horizontal, what we're going to do is we're going to change that shadow. We know our light is coming right down through there, right, because of this shadow, and this is under, and we're going a little. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw that shadow flat on the ground, give it a slight, instead of straight across, a slight diagonal, which is a more active movement, and I'll do a shadow something like that. It'll ground the bird to this surface and make the bird an upright. And then all I have to do with the shadow is make it in the shape of grass. See how easy that was? Boom, 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 boom. What shadow do we have here? There's a little cast shadow as the head sits on top of, I'm not sure what cavity, the chest, shoulder cavity, right? And we want to do that as feathers and get that right. But there'll be a little shadow there. And then all of this, but this is a curve, so it comes down like that. So there's a shadow across there. And then a cast shadow here. It comes down to the leg. Again, we're shooting out, so shadow again. And then the leg is basically a cylinder, but you see that bend in? So put the just the shadow on the leg right there, and it'll run into. All right, and then before we know it, what do we have? Well, we have things we have control over, i.e. dark shapes. Right, and then we can relate, okay, where's the dark of the beak come in relation to the eye, and get it to turn down right there. And then underneath, right, that's kind of the mouth, there's a shadow, and then you got the shadow. And the feathers on the head are different than these. They're a different feel. So I'm going to use different marks to make that. All right, get that feathery feel. And then my shadow, I would just nice and flat. Nice and flat. Don't worry about drawing all the feathers in here. Why? Shadows aren't where we want to look. We want to look at the light. That is fundamental. We look into the light. We do not look into the shadow, Therefore, we don't want to give a lot of detail into the shadow. All right, some of you getting this thing sketched out. It's pretty quiet out there, which usually means you guys are working. Fun. Janny, I hope you're able to sketch along with us. Okay. And then we bend right here. There's a little few feathers that go out like that. A cast shadow. So we'll get a little bit of a hard edge there. And then we're back into our feathers goes down here before it goes into his leg. Right, and like his leg actually goes down, doesn't it? You go, ah. But what did I do? I bent it out. Why? Well, for that action. And then let it just in a little bit. And again, this is all flat. So when we flatten this out, right, now what do we have? We have a big dark shape that we can work with. And since my gesture was so active, one of the first things I want to find out is, does this shape portray the activity of this? And if the answer is no, then how can I make it more active? And the answer is to give it more of a diagonal. This feels pretty active here. This starts to feel pretty dead. So what if we brought this corner further over here? And what this is going to do is it's going to take that side from that to more of a diagonal, which is going to be more active. See, that shape is now more active. And then we can even finish it off by coming sort of to a point right there. Right, and maybe that's a little bit much, I don't know. Sometimes it's good to exaggerate some of this activity, because if you try to get it how it is, it seems to die. So let's go ahead and exaggerate that. Right, that feels like, Okay, now if this wasn't active enough again, what I'm going to look at then now is this. Now, do I need to cut this all the way into there? Or bring this out to there? Because what does that do? Well, it shifts that shape that way, doesn't it? All right, I hope we're not getting too deep and heavy. I've been thinking about this stuff quite a bit, and I'm solving it for a finished painting. Right? I'm not just here goofing off, but we're solving this for a finished painting. And so I want to get down to the brass tacks as quickly as I can. And then we'll extend this out to wherever the edge of the canvas is. Right, that cast shadow, and might get a little bit bigger here. And look, it doesn't have to be even, because sometimes the grass and the shadow, maybe there's a tall piece. Don't get them all going the same direction. But it's just a question of how active we want that dark. Right? You don't want it completely dead, because the bird's not, or completely flat, the bird's not standing on like finely finished concrete or metal or something. Okay, are we quickly starting to get something we can take a hold of? And then it's a matter of, what do we have? So if I go big and round, it starts making this thing look too jolly. Right? Remember, we're coming into a focus here, which is what? It's more of that shape. And when we really look at the bird, that's what's happening. Where's that nose? That beak is pretty quick. All right, and then we don't turn right up, but how does that angle? And again, we're into feathers. So can I draw that edge? So rather than a steel ball, it's got the feeling of feathers. Right? Does that feel a little faster than some big happy head? Yeah. Right? Because that's the nature of that shape. And then again, when we go to do that shoulder, if we do too round, what's that going to do? This is a fast bird. Did you see that if we line this up, and line that shoulder up, what does that do? That feels fast. Look at that. Boom. So that you just shoot right through there. So that we have a fast movement. And then, right, it's made of feathers. It's not, again, made of metal or marble or anything like that. So we get the feeling of those feathers on there. Look, does that throw a shadow right there, giving us a little shoulder? I think it does. And then the dark, right? Because these are darker feathers here, aren't they? They go around that volume. So look, these darks, look how I'm going to point that right to here. We're going to match. And that's going to help finish this volume without having to put a line around it. And then it turns and comes out that way. And do we have our light shape now that we were speaking of? And notice how we move that light shape more this way. Get it going through there. It's more active. The more that light shape starts to come up this way, the stiffer this thing's going to be. It's not going to be a bird of action, but it's going to be a wooden carved bird with no movement. Okay, everybody with us? Boom. You guys have probably got better drawings than I do at this point. I've been here yapping. All right, so as usual, time's getting away from us. This is so much fun. But let's talk a little bit about what's going on. What is going on this year? So, since this is my 50th year around the sun, I've decided my main focus this year is going to be in producing my own work, right? Seeing at this point what can I do? And so I've limited my teaching, but I have worked out a collaboration with 3 artists so that we can get video and keep some of these things going, as well as me experimenting with some of these new ideas. Okay, so if we thought about this as the paint, how is that on there? Hey, we can start thinking about that. That feels too fast. Well, because that's grass in front of it. So we'll have some of that light grass, right? So the shape of this side of the shadow will also be a little bit of a grass shape. And before you know it, we start feeling good. And to work out details, of course, that's time, but this isn't to work out the details. What this is to work out the shape of these values, the size and the placement on the finished canvas. Is it big enough? Do we need to shrink it? Move it this way? Move it that way? Move it up? Do we need to stop this and start over on a new one? Right, this will save you a lot of heartache if we can go from here. Then we could grab some markers if we wanted to. And so how could we simplify this? Well, there's our dark. We know from form, some of this is going to turn over. We're going to have a cast shadow on some of this. All right, we got our Shadow happening over here. A little slicker down here at the little bend. Let's go keep coming this way a bit. Kick down at the last minute. Back up. Where is this? Because this has to do with the gesture where the middle of this is. So again, if we kick it over this way, I'll give that a little bit more of a gesture. And come this way and then maybe back over there. So let's look at this shape now. Right? Because believe it or not, this is going to make or break this painting. Right? This shape right here. And I carry it in to that this is a single value shape. Well, then what we're doing is we're simplifying the visual of the viewer, make the viewer have to do more work, which makes our marks appear stronger. Fewer, simpler marks are stronger. All right, and then if very simply, we could bring out some of this light here by the background, just going gray. And again, we could pull some of this shape out. Some of this background. Right? Comes to life pretty quick, doesn't it? And we haven't spent days and days shading or anything else. But very quickly we're on to this. And then remember, part of this is these feathers. It's not going to be quite this dark, but it's going to be dark enough to really pull out this light shape. Right there. All right, why don't we call it a night right there. Can't believe, what time is it? 7:45. Holy moly. So I can get lost for just hours and hours doing this, and it's fun to get lost, but at the same time you want to make sure you get the information you need, right? Are you working on the gesture? Are you working on the value mapping? Okay, got those figured out. How do we pull the gesture and the value mapping together? Does that work out? Is this really good? Is there anything we could do to this to improve it? Like, is this shape all that it can be? What if this is going this way? How can we support that? What if there was a big shadow on the ground? And that shadow just happened to cut across in a big diagonal. So what that's going to do is that's going to take this part of the painting. You don't have to worry about that anymore. And then what if there was, I don't know, some dark tree or something back here that was also just dark, some foliage or something. Now, is that even more movement there? Why? Because we've got that happening. We reinforced this. Notice I didn't talk once about a bird tonight. I quickly mentioned feathers. But what everything was concerned about was getting to this shape and then asking if this value shape is interesting and effective. And if not, what do we do? Is there anything we can do to change that? So what we're doing is we're getting to the heart of the matter. And then after we got this done, then we can go back for any of those little details or anything else. So we could even put some, it wouldn't, probably not this value. What if there was some even distant trees back here? Would that help to lock everything down a little bit, create a bigger scene, create some depth? Right? And they're not going to be so dark. Why? Because they're way back there. They're way back there. All right, everybody. I see so many of you guys still holding on. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful 2022. And go ahead and take it on yourself to just, it's up to us to be beautiful. We're the artists to bring the beauty. So no matter what's going on around you, you be the beautiful one. The more beautiful you are, the more beautiful your art will be. All right. Love you guys to pieces. Stay tuned for everything that's coming up. In the first few weeks, I'm going to see if I can't get a program up and running here on a regular basis. But got lots of good things in the fire pit, so stay tuned. Love to everybody. Bye, everybody.